So I'm going to be talking about the specs as well as the tests, the compliance test along with it. I also have a few questions that would be relevant to this discussion. So for those of you who don't know me, I have been working on working on driving the creation of UEFI ever since 1995, I think. So it's been a long time. But I just joined last December. So very new to the ARM company, but I have been working on ARM-related things ever since 2008 or 2009-ish. So I've been to these kind of gatherings before. And in fact, as Grant was saying, I was the one who actually drove the ACPI spec from the initial ACPI SIG to the UEFI forum, because the SIG was a very closed community with only 5 members dealing with the content creation. And I think in 2013, I came to Linaro Connect and delivered a keynote basically saying, the UEFI forum has accepted the assets of the ACPI specs, and now we are the forum to create the content after the initial contribution from the ACPI SIG. So right now, Linux and ARM community are contributing to the ACPI spec the same way as the x86 folks and Windows people were doing originally. And in fact, if you look at the current releases like ACPI 5.1 or 6.0, 6.1, and the upcoming 6.2, I think the majority of the contributions are actually from this community rather than the other community. I'm also actually trying to go back and co-chair the ACPI SIG again. The ACPI working group again, and also the test suites along with that. So today I'm going to be talking a little bit about the repetitions, along with what John was saying. And then I'll talk about the tests and also a few ecosystem questions. And there may be some continuing discussions at some other sessions this week as well. I don't think we have the time to complete everything in this particular session. In ARM, I think we have been calling some of the specification, some of the names. We have the base system architecture, which covers the hardware requirements for certain systems. So SBSA is the server-based system architecture, right? And then the BBR is the boot requirement, base boot requirement documentation, and then the server versions of it is the SBBR. These specification basically requires the minimum set of hardware and firmware interfaces that allows you to implement systems that give you the interoperability. But you can certainly implement on top of it for some other value-added features. And I think thanks to Matt, we have actually been able to post these specifications, the SBBA and SBBR and SBSA on the developer.arm.com website without any click-through licenses. It's public. The compliant tests. So I think there were a lot of questions from the community as to, well, now you have all these specifications. What do you do? How do I know I comply to these specifications, right? Do you have some sort of a process for us to go through and make sure our systems are designed in a way that works for the operating systems and so on? So we have created the SBSA test suite that basically covers the some of the feature sets that John talked about. The PE properties, the system components, as well as the PCIe integrations. A lot of issues came out of the handling of the PCIe. People are, very creative, right? You have the spec of PCIe, but then you have the implementations. The two may or may not be the same. So, I think one particular one is that the PCIe spec actually defines the ECAM for configuration accesses, right? But certain hardware didn't implement ECAM. Yeah. Yeah, so as Matt was mentioning, we are also collecting a lot of these kind of stories, and there may be, at some point we could, probably publish some of the implementation guides, to help people avoid these kind of problems in the future by learning from the past, right? So we also have the SBBR test suite that basically covers the firmware interfaces, UEFI, CPI, and SMBIOS. So UEFI testing, the UEFI forum actually created what's called a self-compliance test suite. I'm actually chairing the group who produces that. So we leverage that. And then there's also an open source project called FWTS, which is actually hosted by Canonical. This is the environment, because ACPI, as John was saying, they have not only the static tables, but also the what's called the ACPI methods, which are interpreted environment. So you have to have some sort of OS-like environment to actually help execute or interpret those codes. So FWTS is kind of providing you with such an environment so you can actually access, exercise some of these kind of functions. And then certainly there's also SMBIOS testing. So we intend to provide all these tests through open source licenses, but UEFI certainly has its own licensing model right now. And the FWTS is a test suite that is basically Linux-based. I think it's GPL-based. And then, the stuff that we create from ARM are going to be licensed under Apache v2. So you can take, you can take the content and modify it, and you don't necessarily have to contribute back, but we certainly welcome the contributions to make our test even better. And it's, yeah, I'll point it to that. It's available as alpha quality right now, so you can get access to. And please, encourage your ODM, OEM contacts to try them out. This is really, if you don't try out, then that doesn't provide you any value. But if they start to use that tool to help, verify the implementations, that would be great. And it's built on top of this platform adaptation layer. So ARM is providing a solution on top of, our model, our, ARM trusted firmware and all that. But silicon vendors can certainly port that to their silicon, as well. Yeah. Yeah, this is actually right here. Yeah, so the source, where these tests were coming from, as I was talking, the SCT came from the UEFI forum. We would like all these tests to be in the open source environment, right? But right now, at this particular moment, because of the historical reason, the UEFI SCT is still owned by the UEFI forum, and it was open to the members, but it's not particularly open to everybody. It is being developed now at my insistence. It is developed now in the GitHub environment. So we're kind of preparing the stages where this kind of environment could be open, but there's some, UEFI legal framework that initially had it in the development of this test suites in the forum itself. So we're going to be trying to influence the community to change that, because right now I think one of the problem we we had before was that the SCT was lagging the spec revisions quite significantly. 18 months later, we still didn't have the version that matches the spec releases, right? So that needs some educations to the parties involved in the SCT development. I think Intel has been the major contributor of the SCT in the past, and they had some sort of interesting process where these things are developed. So that took some time. So we need to educate the process and educate the people involved so that the process could be moved to a more open source-like environment. It basically is an environment. It's a shell binary where you can exercise the UEFI interfaces. So it runs through the parameter passing or whatever. Try to. Well, the name of it is called SCT. Well, in the UEFI context, it's a self-complying verification. There's no logo process, associated with the UEFI forum because UEFI forum doesn't want to dictate that kind of a behavior. But as I will be touching on, I think there's a question here that whether we, in the ARM community, should use these kind of tools that we are developing to start a badging process for our servers. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so eventually I think we're kind of also looking at providing a unified release, for these SBSA and SBBR tests. So this is a kind of a picture of the pieces that we contribute from ARM. Those are in the ARM traditional blue color. And the yellow ones are what the partners could contribute. And then the green one is what we like, right? The open source kind of contribution and also the framework. And then the red one is what the UEFI SCT is. The only reason I picked the red one is that this is the area I want to work on to make it more greenish. These are the GitHub locations for these tests. Again, please ask your contacts in OEM and ODM communities to start exercising these tests and give us feedback. So at this stage, I think Charles and I can't promise that we have done everything right in the tests, right? So it could be our tests are still having issues, or it could be the implementation have issues. So we'd like to know, which is which. And if it is test related, we certainly will try to fix them. And yeah, and the other thing is I think we have experienced some of that is people were so nervous about these kind of tests. They didn't want to, necessarily being finger pointed as to, oh, this is your issue or something like that. And don't try to get into that kind of environment. Just work with us. It could be our tests are having issues. It could be your implementation. We need to work together to help each other out, rather than saying, oh, this is not my problem. This must be your problem, right? I think we need to kind of change the attitude about these. Yeah. Yeah, we'll put the slides up. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, the UEFI SCT is actually cross architecture. The ACPI, the FWTS is also cross architecture. So yeah. But there are certainly, certain areas of, if we're checking, a gig controller or something, those kind of things are ARM specific, right? So yeah. Yeah, so there are pieces that are common. Yeah. Yeah, so these are kind of like things of, like the Plugfest, right? I think, quoting a term from the traditional, development before. And so for UEFI and ACPI, we have actually been running some of the Plugfest events in the past where system vendors take their systems to the event, and then the card vendors bring their cards, and OS vendors bring their OS images to the event to test. And so this has been going on for quite a while now, because of the UEFI ACPI development. ARM has started to participate in that environment. So the end of this month, the week of March 27th, there's actually a Plugfest in China where ARM is actually sponsoring. And so I think in the past we have at least 2 events every year, one in the US, one somewhere else, usually in Asia. So the next one is, like I said, end of March in China. In the fall, there might be another one in Taipei. But in the past, we have US-based events somewhere close to Redmond as well, because we want Microsoft to be there as well. So specific to ARM, I don't know if there's a value for ARM to organize another event like this, just for us, the community. That certainly is something we can think about. So I think in the interest of time, so this is a roadmap basically illustrating that we are going to try to collect the inputs from the community and update both of the specifications. And as we update the specifications, we're going to update the test as well. So this is kind of providing a little bit of a rough timeline. You know, this could certainly change over time, but you know, we have collected a lot of inputs so far. So we think in the second quarter of this year, we probably would be updating to the next revision of the specs. And then over time, you know, as ARM architecture progresses and platform architecture progresses, we would also update. Yeah, so a couple of questions to this community. I think this deserves some discussions. The first one is about the certification process. I think some of you have alluded to that before. So, you know, from customers' point of view or OS vendor's point of view, certainly there's a desire to improve the out-of-box, just work kind of experience, right? So we have received feedback that you know, we need to be looking at some sort of certification process. You know, when you run these tests and you have the confidence of this particular system is going to run, you know, these OS versions, then you probably want to put a sticker or something on that system. We have received comments that this would be a very useful thing to help bring the community to you know, to improve that situation. And so this is a question to the community. You know, if you have feedback, let us know. You know, we don't have time to resolve this in this particular session, but you know, we welcome all the comments as to you know, whether this is a good idea or you know, you have ways to improve. Okay, so the second question is, I think we got a lot of comments about what we do with the PCI, the boot drivers. So I think in the past that we have been talking about a EBC architecture. Basically, you compile these drivers into a processor architecture agnostic format. So the intent is that that driver would have one image that works for all different instruction sets. And with the help of Leaf, we actually upstream the EBC interpreter for ARM upstream to the Theano core, which is the UEFI reference implementation. However, this kind of infrastructure is it cannot be the benefit of that infrastructure cannot be really realized if x86 still uses their native drivers, and then there are no other architecture that are important for the industry, right? So if you have to provide both the EBC drivers as well as x86 native, you still have two images. So the intent of having one image that works for everybody is kind of not having enough of a value if you have two architectures. Certainly, if you have more than two, then you at least have the chance of not having to have the third image. What? Yeah. So this, yeah, certainly. This is what I'm going to get to, and then the problem with supporting EBC for ARM, actually, we still have two major issues. One is that there is no compiler for EBC that are supported by the industry. There is one EBC compiler from Intel, but Intel stopped supporting that compiler. You can still buy that, but if you find bugs, nobody is going to help change that compiler for you. And then the other, even probably more important issue that we are facing is Microsoft, as the only signer of the image for Secure Boot, is not signing EBC drivers today. Okay, so the question to the community is, can these two problems really be solved by the industry? And if not, I think it goes back to your question. We probably have to kind of move back to the scenario where we just compile the image for ARM. Yeah, so PCI ROM today can host multiple images. That has been there forever, but so right now you could have a legacy BIOS image, you could have a UEFI x86 image, an ARM image, or whatever EBC image. You can have multiple. Yeah, I think you have, I think we have a session in the leg, right, to continue the discussion. Right now, I think we are over the time limit. Yeah. Yeah, yes. Okay, so if we want to have the continued discussions, find me, find Larry, find the community to continue the discussion. But I need to hand off to the next speaker.